Today's conversation is with Tim Parker, the Chief Executive Officer of the High Speed Rail Authority here in Australia. Of course, we are talking about high speed rail in Australia, the project from Sydney to Newcastle that Tim and his team are responsible for. And I wanted to use this opportunity to address some of the more controversial issues. As it's normal for a project of this size, there has been a lot of criticism about things that could be done differently or things that weren't properly understood. And I thought that Tim would be the ideal person to address those concerns and explain why the project and his team is doing what they're doing. Please enjoy, and if you do, then share this episode with friends and co-workers, like it, and of course, subscribe to the channel, which would make me really happy. Thank you very much. And now enjoy my conversation with Tim Parker. Tim, welcome to the show, and thank you very much for making the time.
My absolute pleasure to be here, Doc.
You are the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian High Speed Rail Authority. Accordingly, we want to talk about high speed rail in Australia today. Some people are of the opinion, and I'm actually one of them, that high speed rail in Australia in 2026 is a now or never decision. Would you agree?
Oh, I think this is one of the best opportunities we've ever had. We've taken the project forward. We have a government that backs it. I think we're in a unique position to actually progress this project, probably more so than any of the private sector schemes that have come before.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And another reason is certainly that the prices only keep going one way, and this is up. So I think if we don't do it this time, it will be very, very hard to bring it up again later, because I can't imagine that more good work will be done on the project compared to what your organization has done in the last couple of years. And if that's still not convincing for the government, then it's probably time to call it quits. Yeah, but we're still optimistic that it is going ahead. It took a long time for the business case between the submission, which was in December 2024, on time, I might add, which is not something that you see every day, to the point where the business case was already published. That was very recently, and the government gave a go-ahead. What's the mood like in your office? I could imagine that some of your team members are quite excited at the moment.
Oh, I think we have been, since the business case was lodged, we have been working. We called it the pre-development phase because we obviously don't just stop working. We're always committed to the longer term here. So although we only had short-term funding, as you said, the business case was delivered on time and on budget, in fact, below budget. And what we were really pleased about was government's decision to actually publish the business case, which is actually quite rare for major projects. And there will be people that will support it. There'll be people that will ask questions. I think getting the public debate is really important. And that's what we've been trying to do, is actually engage with the community about this project. It's fair to say when we started, skepticism was sky high. And over time, it's got less. There's still some, I call it healthy skepticism. But my initial role was to deliver the business case. I've now been given a new role, which is to deliver the development phase. And that's something that I'm absolutely energized about, as are my staff.
Since we just talk about your remit, I had a question on that, which I might just as well ask now. When I saw you being appointed as the CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority, after your background from Sydney Metro that I knew a little bit of, I thought, Okay, so they're putting somebody in to really get this thing done, to get it up and running. So was your remit more to make this project happen no matter what, or was your remit rather to come up with a very solid foundation for an informed decision making by the government?
Now, look, my remit. I met the minister on the first day that I started, and she said, "I would like you to produce the business case by the end of 24." So I started the 15th of January, um, and it's very simple. And my approach to this project is the same as my approach to metro projects. This is important work. It's really important for the community that that project will serve. And so what we've tried to do is take a lot of lessons we learned from other projects, apply them, but produce what I think is a business case is not just a technical document. It's, does this make sense economically, technically, and does it produce benefits? And that's what we tried to do in a relatively short time, in that we started on the 15th of January. We had to bring advisors on board. So the reality is, I think the business case is a very solid piece of work, and you need that to convince government to invest. And I think what's important people have to understand is that we had a standing start. Government gave us money for that. And then they've given us a lot more money now for the development phase. And that's built on the quality of the work, but also on the community reaction to the project.
It's interesting. I heard both sides. I heard some people saying the business case was rushed, it went way too quick. And I also heard people saying the business case took forever, way too long, and so on. So, what I think this indicates is it doesn't really matter what you do, there will always be somebody talking against that. And there will always be somebody saying, oh, well, it wasn't fast enough, it wasn't good enough, it wasn't whatever. Um, since you mentioned lessons learned from other projects, the other thing that I thought when I saw you being appointed was that, okay, there will be a lot of lessons from Sydney Metro, hopefully, because I think Sydney Metro has been a very successful program for a series of major projects. And there will be a number of lessons learned from Sydney Metro that will now, with you being there, find the way into high speed rail. And I thought I found some of them in the business case. For example, the delivery model of having area packages. For example, what you call in the business case advanced manufacturing. I think I saw some of those elements in Sydney Metro as well, like prefabricated tunnel segments and so on. So, to what extent do you take Sydney Metro as a benchmark or some kind of role model for high-speed rail?
So look, I think the Sydney Metro outcome is fantastic. I think it's a world-class project. I always, throughout my career, every project you do, you learn a bit more. So I think I'd hate to meet someone who said that they were perfect. I think you have to learn. So the key lesson around Sydney Metro was, for various reasons, we ended up with quite fragmented contract strategy. We also ended up with a lot of interfaces. And what we found was, as an engineer, we were quite concerned about the technical interfaces. The reality is the technical interfaces, actually engineers can solve technical interfaces. The bigger problem was the commercial interfaces around access, people not turning up on time, work not being finished before the next contractor. That was the biggest cause of friction. And so when we looked at this, we realized that, you know, it's such a big project, you couldn't give it to one contractor. You had to break it into, even the breakup we've done now is large, but to try and remove those contractual interfaces, we haven't removed the technical interfaces. Technical interfaces are there, but give them to one contractor to manage. And one of the benefits is that it means the contractor, we call it white space. So in the program, traditionally, one contractor finishes, then the next contractor comes in, then the next contractor comes in. This way, we're hoping through the ECI process that the contractors can innovate. Can they start fitting the tunnel out while they're still building the tunnel? What are the smarts they can bring? And that was part of the lesson. And feedback from the industry, which was very much, often you talk about innovation, but you don't give us a chance to innovate. We've taken that lesson and said, you help us to deliver this well. So that was the key lesson. We also spoke to our colleagues in the UK who are doing high speed too, and they were very, very generous in giving us their lessons. So, and of course, we also talked to established operators like France, Italy, Germany. All of that came in and fed into. And we talked to China, we've talked to Taiwan, we've talked to Japan, we've talked to all the major high-speed rail, and every good piece of information we've applied. And one of the early decisions was to make it segregated, and that was because we could see the benefits of having a greenfield line. We could also see the benefits of not mixing freight and high speed together. And again, that came from a fascinating conversation with the Germans, who said, we have mixed our two trains together. If we had our choice to start again, we would have a standalone system, which was interesting feedback.
That was really interesting because I always thought that Germany would be the role model for mixed traffic between high-speed trains during the day and relatively high-speed freight during the night. But if they say if we started over, we would do it differently, that's certainly a very, very insightful lesson to take away from that. Yeah, because
and I think
yeah,
I think where they were it started off working really well. As you say, the model, there's nothing wrong with the model, but over time, their railway network has got so busy, and they've got so much more freight, and their reliability, passenger reliability, has dropped to around 64%. And even the Germans have said, that's not a good railway anymore. So I think we've got the advantage in Australia of actually listening to what others have done and learning. And I think their model worked really well. But as it got busier and busier, they've then got this degradation of service. And so that was why they gave us that advice. There was nothing wrong with the model when it started. In fact, it was a brilliant model. But they said over time, you're better to invest and keep the two separate.
I think one lesson from Sydney Metro that you have already applied in high speed inherently, I would say, and you did mention it, that you delivered the business case on time and on budget. I can recall the very first interactions that I ever had with Sydney Metro, and that was back in 2009 when it was still called CBD Metro. And that was in the days where Leslie Linger was still in charge of Sydney Metro and Rod Staples was his deputy. You certainly recall those times. And they started every meeting with 2 slides. And the first slide was their achievements over the last 6 months, which were all on time. And the second slide was a forecast of the plan for the next 6 months and the commitment to do all these things on time as well. And at the time, on time also meant on budget. And I think you've got a pretty good start in the High Speed Rail Authority. And I think that really addresses one of the biggest concerns that I personally had, and that many, many others in the industry have as well. If you overshoot your estimated budget by a factor of 2 or 3 or God knows how much more, that would be a real catastrophe, not just for the industry, but for the whole Australian economy, given the size of the project, if you look at the entire thing, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. So I think the best thing that anybody can wish for is that you can really stick to keeping your promises, especially when it comes to schedule and to budget.
So Doc, I don't know if you remember, but I was head of delivery for the first Metro. So I started it with Rod. I was his right-hand person. I think that's right. I think my background is delivery. I think if we can't meet time and budget for this phase or for the business case, you're absolutely right. Why would anyone have faith? So yes, we are going to run. And it's interesting when this time we got the announcement on the 24th of February. Our advisor tenders were out on the 2nd of March. So we told industry, we said we will move quickly. And of course, industry said we didn't think it was going to be that quick, but that's what we're doing. And our industry briefing is on the 21st of April. We have been planning this for a year. We are ready to go, and I think that is the words to the team is we don't miss deadlines. If we've got to work a bit harder, we will meet them. But also, I think um, we were very took our business case funding very seriously. We spent what we think we needed to spend. We are great believers that at the end of the day, this is my money, your money, and everyone else's money. It's taxpayers' money. We need to use this money wisely, and that's something that I personally believe, and I will make sure the organisation follows that to use the money wisely.
Yeah, yeah, and also I believe there isn't full visibility of what your team has really done with that money. So I just heard another podcast which discussed the high-speed rail business case, I think in a very disrespectful manner. That's my personal opinion. And one of the criticism was, you didn't bother to speak to the Chinese, and you spent $80 million on the business case, but you didn't spend the effort to have Chinese standards for high-speed rail translated into English and so on. And now one of the first things you told me is we spoke to the Chinese, we also spoke to the Japanese, we spoke to pretty much everyone in the industry, and I think this is something that most people don't see. They simply don't have visibility of. And I'm wondering whether it might be possible for your organization, for your own sake, to be yet more transparent about the things that you've already done than you already are. I mean, you are already trying hard to be as transparent as possible, and it's visible in the business case publication. But could you do even more to be more transparent and to engage with critics in the industry?
Look, I think the answer is yes. We're always open to discussions one on one. I think I know the podcast you're talking about. I haven't listened to it. A couple of my team have listened to it.
You haven't missed much.
Look, some people take some people like to take a contrary view. What I do is I look at the people and say, really, what have those people done to take these views? I've been delivering infrastructure now for over 30 years. I think I've got a reasonable track record. I'm very happy to talk to anyone, and we attend conferences to actually tell the story. I don't think it's our role to correct certain people who make assertions unless it's something really bad. I think I welcome skeptics, I welcome critics, because it just makes us be better. And that's why one of the reasons I love being here is you're always, I think I'd call you in cricketing terms, you play with a straight bat. So they're the sort of people that I like. So I'm not going to spend time. I get interviewed regularly with 2GB, and their starting point is we hate the project, but at least we can talk to them. And we're always happy to talk to people if they reach out and they want a conversation. But if they've got their own views, then it's like it's not my role to change their views.
And I think what's also, firstly, thanks for the compliment with the straight bet. That's how I see myself as well. But what I think is also important is that you remain respectful with that. I mean, if I can be skeptical of certain elements of the project, and we will talk about some of these things in a moment, but if my basic assumption is, and I'm telling you straight to the face, that I think you and your entire organization are morons, I don't think that's a very good starting point, because if you became defensive then and don't like very much talking to me, I would fully understand. So that's why I don't do that. I think it needs to be taken into account that you have these decades of experience in project delivery, and your team has been selected very carefully as well. So assuming that it's all stupid what's coming out there is just not the right position to start with.
So, Doc, where I come from is, and we have this in our office. It's called respectful challenge.
Mm.
I don't say to people, I don't derogate people. I ask questions, and I encourage people to ask questions. that is respectful challenge. Why have you done this? Did you think about doing this? But unfortunately, some people they play the man rather than the issue. I'm all about respect. I will treat every person with respect, and quite rightly, I expect to be treated with respect back. I have no problem with respectful challenge, but that is how I like to do business, with respect.
Okay, so let's do a few respectful challenges done with regards to the business case. You said you delivered it on time in December 2024, and then there was nothing to be heard for months on end. And then there was a piece of information saying it's now with Infrastructure Australia for review, which is the normal thing to happen for any business case of this size. And then I think I wasn't the only one thinking that Infrastructure Australia took literally forever to review the business case. I'm not sure to what extent you can tell me what happened during that time. Did they ask you to rewrite half of it, or what happened there, and why did it take them so long?
So let's be the Infrastructure Australia, we have the utmost respect for. They have a role to do a detailed review of projects over $250 million for Commonwealth Government. They also have guidelines on how to produce business cases. We issued the business case to them at the same time we issued it to government. It took them a number of months to review. We didn't rewrite any of the business case. The business case that is available is the business case we submitted. What they did do, which I think is absolutely appropriate, they did ask us questions. How did you do this? Why did you do this? And that was a process. I'm relatively new to the Commonwealth Government, but the government have been very, very clear all along. This is a significant investment decision. We do not want to rush it. Now, there's always an argument that people said, well, you could do it quicker. But they took their time. They went through the business case in detail. There was an election there as well at the same time. So there was a lot of things happening. I can't comment on the time frame. What I can say is the review that came out, and it's public information in November. Basically, they have reviewed it for a number of months. They concluded that the business case was sound and that government, they recommended government proceed to the next stage. Infrastructure Australia are completely independent. They do not get bullied by government to give a green light. In fact, quite the opposite. So from my point of view, they assessed it and they said it was okay. Government said, great, now we will consider it. And they went through the normal process in government, and that is a review process by the, it's a bit sequential in that you need IA to say it's okay first, and then you need government to consider it through government process. And they came to the decision that they'd like to proceed, and we had the decision 24th of February. Could it be faster? Possibly, but it's a government process, and it is the largest infrastructure project in Australia. So it's a big decision, and we were so delighted that they made that decision. But we're also delighted with our interaction with Infrastructure Australia. They challenged us. They asked us, where did you get this? And they have given us some more homework to do. And we've agreed that in the next 2 years, we will address all their comments so that when we go for a final investment decision, those comments are being addressed, which I think is actually a great process, rather than going out and starting building something before you've done the homework.
Yes, and that was one of the feedbacks that I heard from many angles, that oh, thank God they didn't go straight into construction, and maybe that was part of the reasons why previous attempts failed. I can remember back around the year 2000, there was actually a contract in place for building high-speed rail between Sydney and Canberra, and then all of a sudden that thing got terminated. And I can only guess that at the time the government may have started this thing off a bit too quickly compared to what you're doing now, where you taking it from an already thorough analysis in a business case to an even more thorough analysis in the development phase. hopefully leading to a situation where you achieve a very high certainty of both the cost estimates and also the delivery timeframes, because as you said yourself, keeping those promises are very, very foundational to project management and to building trust with all kinds of stakeholders, including the people funding the project.
That's exactly it. It's Bent Flyberg and Dan Gardner-Vook, how big stuff gets done. Plan slowly, build quickly. And that's what we're doing, is we're planning so that when government gives us a green light to build, it can go ahead smoothly. And also we're bringing everyone involved. We're bringing the contractors in, we're bringing the advisors in. So, and we're running it in a competitive environment. So we think we will get the best value for the Australian taxpayers.
When it comes to your training on advanced signaling and train control, nothing beats a good quality. That's why I partnered with the Informa Connect Academy to create 7 fantastic online trainings that I believe are the best and most comprehensive portfolio of online trainings in this space in the entire world. You see the 7 trainings that I'm offering through Informa in the boxes here. And you also see at the very top a web link where you can find information on all of these training courses. If the education and your personal development in the field of advanced train control is of any importance to you, I recommend highly that you check it out. And I would look forward very much to welcome you in one of these training courses. All of them have interactive elements, so we can actually meet face to face in those trainings, even though they are online courses. It needs to be seen to be believed. And now back to the conversation. I'm smiling because I did a previous episode of the podcast where I spoke to a friend in the UK about this book that you just mentioned, How Big Projects Get Done, from Professor Flyberg and Mr. Gardner. I'm still trying to get Professor Flyberg on the podcast. I'm working on it. Yeah, let's see how this turns out. Regarding the business case, or regarding the project before we come to the business case itself, I think for a project of this size and this duration, one of the most important thing, if not the most important thing that you can get and that you have to have, is bipartisan support. We've got predominantly a two-party system in Australia. That means we have 2 major camps that normally shifts the government back and forth between them. So chances are during the duration of the project, there might be a change in government from the one party to the other. How much did you do, and what do you think the feedback is that you got from the present opposition regarding a long-term support of your project?
Listen, I think Bridget McKenzie from the National Party was the transport spokesperson for most of the duration. She has appeared on a number of panels, and what's been interesting is there's a bit of debate about where we should start, but there's not the debate about the need for high speed to bring regional economic benefit. And interestingly, often when a project is announced or the development phase is announced, if one party says it's black, the other party says it's white. There hasn't been a strong pushback. So I think I can't speak on behalf of the government have told me what they think, which is positive. I can't speak on behalf of the opposition. What I can say, there is nothing that we have seen that they are opposed to the project. That's all I can say, is there's nothing we can see. And I think they get it. They understand the fact that Australia is a big place. We need to really get this regional economic benefits. We need to get more housing. We need to start moving away from total reliance on imports, get more manufacturing back in this country. So I think the way I see it, Doc, is that my job is to come up with a good project. If it's a good project, it's going to be hard for either side not to support it. and I sort of put the politics to one side. I've just got to make sure the project is good, and being good means something that the community will really benefit from, an economically viable project, and one that can be delivered on time and on budget. They're the things that help defend the project. And rather than trying to play political games, I just focus on delivery.
I think that's perfectly the right approach for somebody who is responsible for delivering or planning the project. And I think personally it's a pretty good indication that the opposition wasn't up in arms over the last few weeks where the government did make the announcement. To me, that's a good sign, because if they were really
Yes.
massively opposed to the project, they would have had all the opportunities to say what a stupid idea and so on, and they didn't do that. So I'm trying to be optimistic. I take this as a good sign.
Mhm. Yes, hopefully.
Talking about the start of the project, I thought one of the best things, or one of the things that I liked best in the business case, was when you had a little box there where you explained explicitly why you want to start with Sydney to Newcastle and not with Sydney to Canberra, because that was one of the major points of criticisms. Why do you start with Sydney? Why not with Melbourne? Why don't you go to Canberra, which is much more important than Newcastle, and so on? And I thought that you explained this very, very concise and very, well, brief, but very concise and compelling in the business case. I liked that a lot. What I didn't quite understand, though, is your staging of the project, where you said we want to start stage 1A is from Newcastle to Gosford. I can understand that one of the reasons might be that your train depot is on that stretch of the line. On the other hand, the patronage demand on this stage is much, much lower than on all the other stages, on any of the other stages. And I thought there might be a certain risk that for a number of years you're building a very glorified and very expensive tourist railway. What's your view on that?
So let's be very clear, Doc. We've got permission to develop stage 1A and 1B. 1A is basically from Gosford to Newcastle. 1B is from Gosford through to Central in Sydney. The Gosford to Central, because of the amount of tunnelling, will be the longest time. What we've identified is if there is an opportunity, and one of the things that, again, from a Sydney Metro point of view, when you build these projects, they take a long time to build, but I'm really keen to get it operational as soon as I can. And so what we're looking at and what we will continue to explore is the opportunity to actually open the first bit a year or a few months ahead of the other part. And it's not to do with patronage or a tourist railway. It gives us the chance to bed in the staff. It gives us a chance to bed in the signalling system. It gives us a chance to bed in the rolling stock. And it's simply, if we can open a section before the whole thing, then we're providing at least some form of service to the public. They are seeing a return on their investment. We haven't firmed it up, but it's really, that's the opportunities. As soon as we can open, let's open. Let's not leave the infrastructure there for a year and a half while we're finishing the tunnelling. Can we open? So that's all it's about. It's that the main project, when we talk about 10 to 12 years, it's to open the whole thing. If we could open that surface section a bit earlier, we'd take advantage of that, because it gives us a chance to showcase the high speed. We know that all railways need bedding in time. And so if we could bed in the staff, the railway, for that other section, having less patronage is actually a benefit to bedding in a railway. And then when you open the other section where you get the more patronage, it's good to go. So that's what it's about. It's not, it's got no other motive other than saying, if we can finish a section and open it, that would be great for the public, be great for the long-term reliability and viability of the railway.
And it's almost like a soft opening, isn't it? If you don't start in the heart of
Absolutely.
Sydney, yeah. But I think
And
that
if you,
makes sense, yeah.
yeah, and that's what it's about. It's about, if there's an opportunity to open a section of the railway early, we will take it.
I'd like to address some of the points of criticism that people came up with that I heard in my surroundings in previous podcast episodes, or concerns, shall we say. One is regarding the speed. You decided to go for a top speed of 320 kilometers per hour. I understand why you do that, because there are, if you look at high speed train projects, there are certain levels of speeds. It matches, for example, what the Japanese do with their high speed project. And of course, some people criticize that the Chinese run much faster. So, what's your view on that? Why did you decide to go for 320?
So the Chinese are the odd people out. They run at 350. And no, and they have good reason to. They have much longer high-speed rail than anybody else. You know, they have lines from Beijing through to Hong Kong. So they made that decision. If you go around the rest of the world, it's amazing. It's not. No one can. I keep asking why 320, because they all operate in that 300, 320. Japan, Spain, France, Italy, Taiwan. They're all there, and it seems to be the optimum around travel time, which is the most important thing, plus maintenance and efficiency. In that, obviously, you've got the square rule. The faster you go, the more you square the resistance, and so that seems to be the optimum. There's also discussions with the Spanish and the French about if we decide to use ballast track any faster than 320, you get the ballast flicking up. So 320 we think is the sweet spot. I think the main thing is that when we looked at, people get obsessed with speed. What we are obsessed with is providing competitive travel times. And so we're looking at halving, or in fact more than, be less than half of the travel time to Newcastle. It'll be twice as fast as a car. Even the longer runs, you know, Melbourne to Sydney, you know, 4 hours, it's CBD to CBD. And when you think about, if you catch the plane, you drive to the airport, you've got to get there at least half an hour in advance, sometimes a bit longer. You get on the plane, you get off the plane, you've got to pick up your luggage, which takes you half an hour, then get into a car and drive into the city. Whereas a train, I mean, I don't have to tell you so much, but a train, you get on, you get on with your luggage, you then have 4 hours of productive time. You know, if you want to work, you can work. You've got Wi-Fi, you've got everything else. And then when you get to your destination, you're in the heart of the city you're going to. And so we focused on, rather on speed, we've said, what is a competitive travel time? And what it's meant is that, unlike some of the earlier studies, we have more stations in the region, and that's where we get the regional benefit. And so, yes, some of our alignments are a bit strange, but they're all about balancing travel time with also serviceability, so we can actually pick up some passengers on the way. So could you go faster? Possibly. Is there any point? Probably not.
Fares. You had a comparison of fares, including an estimate or like a projection what you think the future high-speed trip from Sydney to Newcastle will cost, and the number was $31, and I thought that was very reasonable and also very attractive. Critics might say, and some of them have said, that that's not enough. High speed should be attracting a premium fare. But I think there will be some kind of sweet spot where if you make it too expensive, then yeah, you lose patronage. So what's your view on that? How did you get to that number of $31 for the fares?
So look, I think that is an average fare. So what that means is that in some cases it may be even cheaper than that. In some cases, it will be more expensive. I think what a lot of people forget is that when they pay their $10 or $15 to go to Newcastle, that's not the real cost.
Yeah,
It's heavily subsidized. The cost that we've used in the business case, there's a little bit of, if you like, if you put the fare too high, you lose patronage. So that's sort of where we think the sweet spot is. It doesn't mean to say that that's a sweet spot forever, but at that fare, we modelled and we predict that fare will fully cover all our operating and maintenance cost. So it's a railway that can sustain itself, because if we go to government for a lot of funding to build it, I don't think we want to go to government and say, by the way, also you have to subsidise it. It doesn't mean to say that travel could not be subsidised, but our model at the moment is that when it's complete, it will cover its costs to operate and maintain it, which is a great position to be in for a sustainable product that you want to expand in the future.
Okay, so it's not just for clarity, because that was one of the things mentioned in the other podcast that I didn't quite understand, because I read in the business case what you just said, that the fare box is meant to cover the operating costs. So there's no plan for an operational subsidy, long-term subsidy of the high-speed railway.
No, we think it's a product that you have to subsidize the construction.
Yes.
But we think from once you start operating, and when we talk to a number of the other operators around the world, that is also the situation. Some of the, I think it's the Beijing to Shanghai line. It makes a lot of money for the operator. What we've said is we want to run. Our preference is to run a regular service and have people on all services and have some flexibility in the fare depending on demand, compared to running less services and charging a small fortune.
Yeah.
So we see this is very much about service offering, and that's the modelling. And I think people have to understand the business case is ultimately a model. It's a model of the cost. It's a model of the patronage. That was the model we used, and that's why I think it's $37 to catch the bus. And if you take your car, and we ignore petrol, which is obviously going up an awful lot at the moment,
Yeah.
but if you ignore petrol, I think the tolls alone are about $23. And then, of course, you've got parking in Sydney, which is very expensive. So it becomes a very attractive alternative. And what has been fascinating for me is when I started on Metro in 2015, and we talked about Metro to people said, I'll never get it. Why would I get it? I can drive. And I think what we've seen since it's opened, all these people who've said, I'll never get Metro, they're getting on the Metro because it's quick, it's fast. And the same will happen in regional Australia, I think, where people will go, you know what, I can drive to the station, I can leave my car, I can hop on the train, I'm in and out for a medical appointment. And also, train travel is so much more and less stressful than driving your car. You can put your headphones in, listen to music, you can get your laptop out. It's a different experience. And of course, these high-speed trains are very, very comfortable. They're not rattling around, they whiz along. So I think we think it's a very attractive offering. We will, obviously it's to be resolved, but we think demand pricing will obviously happen. But there'll also be opportunities for people to buy like a season ticket, where if you're going to go every day and you're a regular customer, absolutely you should be rewarded with a discount.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff that's got to be developed in the future.
One of the most controversial bits, I think, was around the bit stage 1C. So from Central to Parramatta to Western Sydney International Airport. And there was a lot of debate online around this, like why can't you do this with the metro? Are you getting in competition with the metro? Why can't you go straight to Western Sydney Airport and then have people using the metro to get into Central? Why do you have to have this funny bow of an alignment to get into Central in the first place? So tell us a bit about the rationale with that 3 stops in Sydney. Who knows whether it will be more than 3, but for the time being, the idea to stop not just in Central, but also in Parramatta and in Western Sydney Airport.
So look, I think Western Sydney Airport, Western Sydney is a really important area, but so is Eastern Sydney. We're not going to move the Opera House out to Parramatta, despite people wanting us to. What people have to remember is this is not a New South Wales project. This is a national project. And you have to think about the line in the context of national railway. So we're always thinking about where is this? What's the national network going to look like? Where would people want to go? And we think that a lot of people will want to use the WSA, the airport, in the future. We also think that people, as far as Goulburn and Canberra, they may want to use it. So, serving an airport, we think makes a lot of sense. We also think that if I am a interstate traveller, I may want to go to Parramatta, I may want to go to Central. Both are important. Central is the best connected station in Sydney. Now, I know Parramatta is very important. It's going to have a metro there. It's going to have, it's got good heavy rail. But if you're traveling with luggage and everything else, we think that in the future, the ability to get on the high speed journey from Central to Western Sydney Airport will be 25 minutes, very similar to, say, something like the Heathrow Express. But also the train is designed for passengers with luggage. Metros, quite rightly, they all have a part to play, but metros stop fairly frequently. They are designed for general commuters and general passengers. That's why Heathrow Express works. Why does you have Heathrow Express? Doesn't everyone get the metro? They now got the Elizabeth line, which goes out there. So I think they're doing different things. But the real thing is that a lot of people keep thinking about this as a New South Wales project. It's not. The first stage happens to be in New South Wales, but think about it from a nationwide perspective. If you're traveling from Melbourne to Sydney, you may want to go to Parramatta, but you probably also want the ability to go to downtown Sydney. So that's why we've got that arrangement. It's all about thinking about the national picture. We actually think that high speed and airports work incredibly well together, based on some experience in Germany. Even some of the places in Europe, they have even code sharing. You fly in, your code share covers you onto the train to your next destination. I think we could do something really quite magic here in Australia.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen that. Reminds me of several months ago. You put a claim on the ground online talking about a high-speed rail stop at Melbourne Airport, Tullamarine. And the first thing I thought was,
Okay.
okay, there will be another spanner in the works of the Melbourne Airport rail that they're currently planning there, because now some people will say, now why would we want to build this in the first place if high-speed rail is coming in? Why can't we have high-speed rail paying for that connection to the airport and stuff like that? Turns out slightly differently. So Melbourne seems to go ahead with the airport rail by themselves for the time being. But then obviously the question would be to what degree it would be a duplication of an existing rail service if high-speed rail did also stop at Tullamarine. I'm not sure if you spent much thought on that since you made
No.
this post
So,
many months
so,
back.
so, so Doc, I was at a conference and someone asked me a question, and someone said, "Could high-speed rail stop at Tullamarine?" And I'm an engineer, so I answered it literally, which was yes. I didn't say it would. I didn't say we were planning it. I
Ah,
just answered a question. And then it got translated in that Tim is planning to put high-speed rail to Tullamarine.
oh, that's
What?
ridiculous. Yeah, yeah, that's what
So
happens. Yeah.
that's the background. The real story is that now we are moved into this phase. We would like to talk to. We will obviously do work with New South Wales. We'll do work with Victoria and work with Queensland and ACT. We need them to tell us, how does high speed rail fit in with their plans. We can't decide exactly. We need them to give us some input, and that's what we will do. So we will work with Victorian Transport, Queensland Transport, ACT, to develop we've already got if you like, the concept of a blueprint, and then we want to develop that further, and that will involve very, very close coordination with the state. We won't tell the state where high speed will go. We will work with them to agree an appropriate solution, which ties in with their other investments. So it's not for me to say high speed versus this. What we want them to recognize that high speed is reality, and let's get the corridor planning done. But the actual decision on where we go will be in consultation with the various states.
One more question about the existing or the first stage of the line. You envisage a very, very long tunnel, pretty much the entire bit from Gosford to Central and then onwards to Parramatta and Western Sydney Airport. And critics say this is more than twice the length of the longest railway tunnel in the world to date. Whether that wouldn't be an unforeseeable engineering risk or what have you. Just wanted to get your views on that. I mean, if it was such an enormous risk that's uncalculable, then you probably wouldn't have suggested it, would you?
Well, I think if you if you go from, I think it's from, if you go to Epping to Sydenham, that's a 22-minute underground journey basically, or from Chatswood to Sydenham. That's all in tunnel. So we'll be in tunnel um, from Central to Gosford for about 30 minutes. So yes, we're in tunnel. Look, that is our current proposal. If part of the ECI process is if someone can come up with a better option, we're open to consideration. We're not saying this is the only way of doing it. However, if you drive down the M1, you can see how they had to build the M1. They've had to basically cut it through mountains.
Yes, yes.
You look at what they've done with the train. The reason the train, there's nothing wrong with the trains, but to make the alignment work, they basically have to go all over the place. That's why they have an average speed of 60 kilometers an hour, and why it takes 2.5 hours. So we've also got, when the train was built, it was in the 1800s and something. The Victorian engineers did really well. They didn't have the sort of environmental constraints we have now. So we've got to balance our technical challenges with the environmental challenges. Also, one of the benefits we have that many other countries don't have is we have great rock. I know that sounds silly, but tunneling through Hawkesbury or Sydney sandstone, the tunnelers call it God's rock because it's that classic, not too hard, not too soft. So yes, there's a lot of tunneling, but it's not of the technical difficulty, say, of some of the other places around the world or even in Australia. We have good tunneling conditions. Also, we now have exceedingly good tunneling experience in this country, people that know how to do it. So it's not an area, there's a lot of it, but it's not a technical area that causes me to lose any sleep. And certainly having been involved in Sydney Metro, where we've done a lot of tunneling, I'm very, very comfortable.
Yeah, and I believe part of the business case was also a lot of geotechnical analysis and actually like drilling probes to make sure that the tunnel alignment that you had in mind is actually feasible, and that the
Yeah,
the
basically.
the, the friendly rock is actually where you think it is, whereas other people seem to discard it more on a general basis. Like, I imagine that tunneling under the Hawkesbury River must be close to impossible, and therefore I don't like it. So I tend to trust more the engineering assessment of your team and the actual work that was done by geotechnical specialists.
Yeah, so look, we what we did with the geotechnical, we did our own investigation, but we also had access to every other bit of geotechnical work through New South Wales. So they have a database of geotechnical logs. So we're able to look at not just the holes that we drilled, but also the holes that other people have drilled for other projects. And we think that the tunnel is predominantly in sandstone. So, and because unlike a metro where we have stations quite close together, we can go quite deep. So we know that we can get into the sandstone belt. Um, you know, Metro, City and Southwest, we had to go through soft ground across the harbour. That's tricky, but we'll be deeper and we can go into pure sandstone. And so I think that's why, from a technical and an engineering perspective, I'm quite comfortable. We will have to do some strategy on fire and life safety and all that type of thing. But again, technically, it's not that challenging because of the experience we already have here.
I want to be conscious of your time because you are a CEO, you must be busy. I certainly have more questions. I haven't touched on the whole housing and regional growth and so on at all. But I mean, that would probably be another half hour or so that we simply don't have. I think we could cover a lot of ground regarding potential areas of criticism for the business case. And I thought you brought forward quite compelling, understandable arguments why you want to do things in the way that you want to do things. And people can disagree with the decision-making criteria. People can have different opinions, but at least I think this conversation has helped people to understand why you want to do what you want to do. So thank you very much for that. I'm very certain that this will help many people listening to the show understanding your project better. And I will also want to put a link to the business case in the description of the podcast so that anybody who wants to read through 300 pages is welcome to do so. Thank you very much for all the clarifications. I wish you all the best for your project. Just keep doing the good work, keep being on time and on budget, and I think things will sort out very, very nicely.
Doc Frank, it's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to speaking to you again at some time.
Thank you very much, Tim. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you like the content, then the best way you make sure that you don't miss out on any of the future episodes, just subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you also get access to all the previous episodes, which I'm pretty sure there will be many that are of interest to you. Another thing that you can do to help not just your own environment, but the entire industry is to share this episode with friends and co-workers, because it helps more people in our industry to get educated, and an educated rail signaling industry is a better industry. With that said, thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon, and bye for now.